All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have a great meeting planned for today. And we have this, the focus of today's meeting will be on communications. Super important for those of us that are COPE leaders to embrace this topic, right? Couldn't be a more important topic for those of us that are COPE leaders. So welcome to everyone so as we get ready to talk about communications. We start with introductions and announcements. So why don't we go ahead and get started. I noticed that Cosette is here. She's from Geyserville. Are you a COPE leader, Cosette?
Oh, yes, for all 5 of us.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm going to mute you here. Let's see. Ann Dubell.
Yes.
I can't remember where you're from.
Santa Rosa.
Santa Rosa. Okay, great. So you're just interested in what we're up to.
Yes, I'm in with Bennett View HOA, and we're just starting. Our quad has developed a phone tree, but other than that, you know, it's to be determined.
Great. Well, certainly office hours is a good place, or the info session that we have once a month would be a great place for you to start. You can find the link to that on our website. Diane and I and Elsa would be happy to help you get started.
Okay, I'll just say I'm going to leave them because there's another emergency preparedness meeting I'd like to go to. I didn't realize this wasn't really appropriate for me.
No, that's okay, and we're happy to help. So hopefully we'll see you at the info session.
You bet. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Michael Camper.
Yes.
Where are you from, and are you COPE leader?
West Dry Creek, Mountain View Ranch Road.
Oh, great. Are you a COPE leader out there?
Yeah, I'm one of the co-COPE leaders with Charlie Schaefer.
Okay, great. Well, we'll have to get more information from you because I don't think we've seen you at a meeting before.
You may not have. No, I think Charlie's been to one, but yeah.
Great, welcome. All right, let's see who else is new today. Dennis Orbis.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm a disaster management consultant. Turn on my video here. Very interested in your group. We actually have a group of international disaster managers coming to your county in August. And I'm here to learn a little bit more about your group and maybe see if we could incorporate a small presentation from you to our disaster managers. I've met Nancy, and our host for part of that day is Sam Wallace at the EOC.
All right, great, thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
All right, Carla Rosen.
Hi.
Hi, Carla. Are you a COPE leader?
No, I'm not. It's just something that I'm interested in learning more about and making sure that my neighborhood is safe.
Great. Thank you. I'm glad you're here. Again, you might find that it's helpful for you to be in our info session that we have once a month. And you can register for that on our website because we'll talk more about COPE and help you get started.
Okay.
Thanks, Carla.
Thank you.
And then let's see. Oh, look who's here. Scott Newman, haven't seen you in a while. Great. And there's a couple of folks on the phone. I have Linda's iPhone. I'm not sure if that's Chief Collister or not. Aha, off doing something else.
It's Linda
Who is it?
Chaffin.
Ah,
Linda
hi
Chaffin.
Linda, welcome.
Thank you.
All right.
There's a
Anybody
meeting.
else?
There's a meeting conflict, Priscilla. Fire Safe Sonoma meeting is at the same time, which is where Marshall and Linda and I were up until about 2 minutes ago.
Okay, good to know. Good to know. And I noticed that Fergus O'Sullivan's here as well, and he is not a COPE leader, but somebody on Fitch Mountain. So great. Glad to know who everybody is and have some introductions. All right. I have just a couple of announcements and then I'll open it up for more announcements. Our next meeting for COPE leaders is in March on our usual third Monday, and we'll be meeting at the Geyserville Fire Station. And again, this meeting is really intended for COPE leaders and our collaborating agencies. But those of you who are here, feel welcome. We want to share this information with you today. The other thing I wanted to make you aware of is Fire Safe Sonoma has some money to do home assessments for folks that are low income. So I would encourage you to pass that information on to your folks in your area that may be of low income. And I'm going to put that link into the chat right now. And there you go. All right. So check that out. It's a great opportunity for folks that are low income to get a nice home hardening assessment and defensible space assessment. The last and most important is we're going to start a social gathering called Taco Tuesdays. So thanks to the research that Elsa did, we have a site. We're going to meet at Agave on the 7th of March at 5:30. Hope you can join us. It'll be fun. Again, just an opportunity to get to know each other and have some tacos and margaritas if you are so inclined. So I hope to see you all there. All right. Anybody else have any announcements to share? Nobody else. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Brown to give us tip of the month.
Sorry, I just wanted to add that the March meeting is in person at the Northern Sonoma County Fire Protection District in Geyserville.
Yes, Priscilla had mentioned that. I'm wondering if I could have the address for that, or I'm sure it'll be sent on one of the upcoming messages.
I can put it.
Absolutely. All righty. Let's see what else we got here. Could somebody send Susie Cummings the Zoom link? I'd appreciate it. All right, Nancy, it's all you.
Okay, and I just have kind of a quick tip. I know we got a lot to talk about, but before our next meeting, the time will change again. March 12th is time change. I like to point this out to you twice a year because this is a really great day for you to think about whether or not your go bag is ready to go. So look at whether or not your batteries are fresh, check your food expiration dates, look at your water supply. If you've had any medication changes over the last 6 months, update your medication in your go bag. If you've had any contact changes, so if your brother that lived in Texas moved to Ohio, you need to change that information as well. So if you could also let your neighbors know, this is a really good time to update that so you will be ready to go. Leave it there, Priscilla.
Okay, thank you so much. I will turn it over to Mr. Peters.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, now we
see the
can
screen
hear you.
now? Okay. Sorry.
Yeah.
I got remuted somehow. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly, but please stop me if you have questions. Just shout them out. Basically, what we're trying to do is cover the kind of issues that occur during emergencies. And the idea is for you to be better prepared when that kind of thing happens. And this is the fire that you may recall that we had coming right near the River Rock Casino. During that fire, there were a lot of things that happened, and I'll try to go through a couple, but the thing you need to remember most of all is that everything you expected to work is not necessarily going to work. The internet may be down completely. Cellular towers may also be down. Roads may be closed. During the LNU Lightning Complex fires, if you had a heart attack and somebody dialed 911, the response time was running more than 6 hours. So you may not find that, as Chief Marshal Tuberville says, that when you most need us, we may not be there. So it's really important for the communities to be prepared to help themselves and find alternative ways in which to communicate that need. These are a bunch of apps that are available to you. I should have said at the beginning, this slide deck is available to anybody that wants it. I can send it to Priscilla or Elsa, and they can download it to anybody that would like it. But PulsePoint is an older app that was originally designed for CPR and AED incidents. We used it for a number of years until Watch Duty came along. Watch Duty proved to be, frankly, more robust and a better app. And Watch Duty basically tracks wildfire incidents once they're confirmed that it's an actual incident and not a controlled burn or some other reported smoke or something like that. GroupMe is something that COPE uses. Its major advantage is that we frequently have one of our fire chiefs on the app, and so questions can be asked. The thing about GroupMe that you have to be very much aware of is in order for it to be effective, you have to go back and look at the prior postings, prior questions that were answered already, or avoid just casual chats, because GroupMe is really designed for more urgent communications and questions. My Shake is an app having to do with earthquakes. Some people think it's pretty cool because it sometimes gives you a few seconds warning before there may be an earthquake. Windy is an app that kind of shows you graphically the direction and speed of wind. And as many of you know, much of wildfire direction is a function of wind speed and direction. And First Aid is an app in case you have something going on and you need help and you don't remember exactly how to do it. The First Aid app will often talk you through how to deliver first aid to somebody that's been injured. Primarily for official notifications, 911 is our #1 way to try to get through. And you got to remember, when you call 911, you're usually under stress. So you have to really sort of get your wits about you and remember that the exact address or intersection or location details can be extremely important. And you sometimes will find that the map that they're using, particularly the sheriff's office in unincorporated Sonoma County, the map that they're using is not always as up to date as where you are. Because I've been in the situation a number of times where they could not find an intersection that I was literally sitting at with 2 street signs showing this is the intersection. They couldn't find it on their map. So you have to be able to give additional information as necessary to help them identify the location. Then you describe what is the emergency so they know what kind of assistance is needed. And if it's a medical incident, very often they have the ability to talk you through. So even somebody that's never been trained in CPR, AED, they can literally talk you through what to do. And so they're extremely helpful to dispatch. For some reason, the system keeps muting me. Anyway, so the medical incidents, you can get help from 911 for that. Here's some additional sources of information. NOAA alerts, of course, come through the NOAA radios. The newest radios have what's called SAME, which is a method by which you can leave the radio on silent, but it'll turn itself on in the event that there's an alert in your area. So you can put a code for Sonoma County in. They're not very precise, like, for example, different COPE neighborhoods might have different needs, but NOAA is not going to alert you down to the level of a COPE neighborhood. They're going to alert you based on pretty much on the whole county. SOCO alerts, this is basically Sonoma County. And again, it's a good source of official information, particularly evacuation zones and that kind of thing. NIXL is sometimes useful. It depends on the area and who sends the NIXL alert, but basically it can also help you identify particularly law enforcement and sometimes fire and where there are evacuations and that kind of thing. If you have a cell phone, unless you've turned it off, you will get wheel alerts. And wheel alerts are similar to like an Amber Alert. And it basically is going to come through your cell phone and make a very clear, loud noise, and your cell phone is going to send you a message. One Call Now is a system that CERT uses and a number of the COPE organizations now use, and some of the Map Your Neighborhood organizations in the Sebastopol area use it. And basically it's a three-part. One is a voice message, a second is a text message, and the third is an email message, and it can send them all simultaneously to a large group of people, but it also can be geo-fenced or geolocated. So for example, for my COPE area, we have 8 areas literally by street and by block, and I can send a different message to each one of those areas. So if there is an evacuation route that has been blocked by a fallen tree, I can tell people in a particular neighborhood that that's the case and what the go-around method is. And then of course there's the high-low sirens. When you hear the high-low sirens, it means it's time to get out of Dodge. They're telling you to leave now. Start thinking about what would happen if you didn't have all of these devices. Your cell phone's not working, your radio batteries are dead because you didn't replace them. There's always what we refer to as sneaker wear, meaning you open your front door and you walk across the street and you say to your neighbor, are you okay? Do you know that we're supposed to evacuate? Are you prepared to go? And so forth. The strongest method that I know of for helping prepare a neighborhood is the buddy system. Very frequently, you need more than one buddy. We just had an incident recently in the Clover Springs COPE area where there were a little small neighborhood group, and a family had 3 buddies, but for one reason or another, all 3 were unavailable. And the person had an incident and ended up with a medical problem and lay there for 6 hours because nobody knew that they were there. So the buddy system is one of the stronger ways to try to help your neighbors, but you really make sure that it's redundant. You want to have multiple people checking, or at least coordinating with each other as to who's going to be checking. Sometimes if you have landlines still, you can get them to work when nothing else does. But increasingly, the vendors that sold landlines, typically AT&T and all the Bell companies, have given up on landlines, and it's no longer a priority for them because they're all selling wireless. So it's not something that you can necessarily rely on. Cell phones, of course, work when the cell towers are working. Sometimes the cell towers work even when there's no electricity because they're supposed to have battery backups, but they don't always have battery backups that are working. Increasingly, we see the use of what are called satellite phones. That's a battery-operated phone that connects directly to a satellite and links up and then links down. Those are usually quite reliable because they're not relying on local cell towers that may have fallen down or burned down or something like that. But they're a bit pricey. They are dropping in price and they're becoming more common in emergency situations. Another recent example is the Starlink system, which gives you an alternative for internet if you have a subscription to Starlink. And we are beginning to use Starlink in Sonoma County, particularly in our radio telecommunications systems, which I'll describe a little bit later, called GMRS radio. We're using satellite connections through Starlink to be a backup to cellular connections so that we can continue to transmit information from these repeater towers that we are putting up around the county. SMS text, sometimes you're in an area where you have a very weak cell signal and the voice cuts out and is not decipherable, but a text will still go through because the amount of space or bandwidth that a text requires is less. So often, even if your cell phone is not working for voice, you might try texting. Email works, of course, when the internet is up, and it'll work through a cell phone, but only if there's cell towers. If you don't have cell connection, then you're not likely to get email to work unless you have another way of getting it to work, such as fiber optic to your home or copper wire or something to your home. Websites, again, only if the internet's working are you going to be able to reach out on a website. There are three kinds of radios, handheld radios. I'm not going to get into the technical details of what they are, but I'm going to give you a very brief overlook of that. One is called Family Radio Service. Those are your kids' walkie-talkies. They're actually amazingly effective. They have a range usually of about a mile, except for obstructions. And if you're in a hilly area, it's not going to be a mile. It'll be much less than that. It'll be more line of sight. But they can be very useful, and there's no license that's required. The new one, the new kid on the block, is GMRS radio. Those are also walkie-talkies like the FRS radios, only they're significantly more powerful. The FRS radios are half a watt. The GMRS radios are 5 watts for a handheld, typically up to 8 watts for a handheld, and up to 50 watts in a mobile in a vehicle. And they typically go 30 miles line of sight, not 1 mile line of sight. Although again, that can be blocked by obstructions, buildings, mountains, and things like that. We are currently building out what's called a repeater network. And without getting too technical, what that means is that I broadcast not directly to your radio, I broadcast to a tower, and then tower picks up my signal and sends that signal out to a broader area where you pick up the signal bounced off the tower. So it's basically like a relay system. And that repeater system, we have 4 repeaters that are in the process of being built. One of them is already completed, and the 3 others are in the process. And Sonoma County is building out repeaters as fast as we have the ability to do so with the budgets that are available. Frequently, we also put on those same towers, those repeater towers, wildfire camera detection systems and weather stations, so that we can also detect what the micro weather is in that particular area. And the cameras are designed for early detection of ignitions, particularly when we're asleep at night. We don't want a fire starting and burning for 2 or 3 hours before anybody notices it. And the cameras will notice it and alert us. Ham radio, that GMRS radio does require a license, but it doesn't require a test. So if you have $35, you can get a GMRS license. That's all you need is $35. No test at all. Ham radio requires you to be technically licensed for ham radios, and the test is not the easiest thing in the world, although it's not too daunting. There are many, many people that have gotten their ham license. Usually we use the ham radio people through the Sonoma County Amateur Radio Association or the ACS, which is the Emergency Sonoma County group that does volunteer work with ham radios. And they have a seat at the Sonoma County Emergency Center so that they can communicate out. Most of your citizens in your neighborhood are not going to be equipped with any of these radios. So the radios usually in the COPE and the CERT situation are designed for leadership. And we do have a new GMRS radio protocol that COPE is working on. The board is reviewing it. And once it's adopted, we recommend to COPE neighborhood leaders that they access that GMRS radio system in order to be able to get real-time updates. The good news is the 2 fire districts in our neighborhood, the Cloverdale Fire District and the Northern Sonoma County Fire District, both have put GMRS radios into their vehicles so that they can communicate with us, along with communicating to the Department of Transportation and Public Works about road closures and fallen trees on its evacuation routes and things like that. There's some more places you can go. Weather Underground and Weather Link gives you not only public weather stations, but also personally held private weather stations, so you can see the microclimate conditions near where the wildfires are, and you can get a better sense of what the wind speed and wind direction are from those weather stations. Alert wildfire cameras are also a source of information. They can tell you, usually they're not so much used for detection of ignition, they're mostly used for identification of direction of movement, but they are available. There are also another version of wildfire cameras that are literally privately funded. They're not funded by PG&E or the Sonoma County, and we are putting those cameras up on the towers that are being built, the GMRS repeater towers. But the signal from those cameras is also published and widely available, so you can access the weather station and the video of the camera from your computer. You can't control the camera, but you can see what the camera's saying. Radio scanners, some people have an actual radio scanner, some people use their cell phone and do, if there's an internet access, they can go to online radio and they can listen to the scanner. Why is that useful? There's a lot of detail that comes across on the scanner when they send additional trucks, water tanks, or other things to various areas. And by listening to the scanner, once you get used to listening to the lingo and the department's call signs and things like that, you can get a better sense of what's going on with a fire that is out there in the wilderness, where it's going, what the difficulties with that fire might be. You can pay a lot of attention just listening to the radio. You can't talk, you can't communicate with anybody, but you can listen. CAL FIRE also has a Twitter feed. Sometimes the Twitter feed outpaces CAL FIRE's own announcements. Whoever is doing Twitter for CAL FIRE is often Johnny on the spot. And so following their Twitter feed often gets you information that hasn't become very public. Here's what the FCC recommends for communicating during an emergency. One is make sure that all of your equipment, remember, if you have a big fire, you're very likely to lose power. So make sure you have batteries and spare batteries. And you need to check your batteries periodically. Charge everything. If you hear that there's a red flag warning, first thing you should do is make sure all your batteries are fresh and charged. Back up your computer data. print out anything that you need that's emergency information, like contact information for relatives or banking or other information that you might need. You should note also and have in your go bag all the emergency and non-emergency numbers. Oh, let me go back. You want to also find out whether or not the 911 in your particular area supports text to 911. Because an alternative, if you can't call 911 because you have a very weak cell signal, sometimes you can text 911 and report what the emergency is. You might want to consider buying a battery operated or a solar powered device to recharge your various devices, or to charge a radio or even a portable television, because hand crank will keep going as long as you have the energy to keep cranking. You can keep the power going. And then you want to make sure you listen for where the shelters are. You want to monitor the emergency broadcast because they may tell you about road closures during evacuation. You might want to look at what other phone devices you have. I keep my phone on AT&T. My wife keeps her phone on Verizon. Sometimes one of them goes down, but the other one stays up. So having two phones with two different services increases your likelihood of having a redundant solution. Don't call 911 and ask for information. Use 911 sparingly and only when there is a real something you have to report in the nature of an emergency. Also, don't repetitively dial over and over again. If you do repetitively dial, what you're effectively doing is blocking a limited resource from people that may have an additional emergency. And then finally, if you're evacuated and you do have a landline, if you have forwarding capability, forward your landline to your cell phone, because someone may be calling your landline to find out if you're okay. And if you remember to forward your landline to your cell phone, that's often a good way to stay in communication. Mainly, the message should be you have to learn to be redundant. You have to learn to be self-reliant. We encourage at CERT learning first aid, learning CPR, AED, and being able to render assistance to your neighbors as needed. And we also encourage people to buy their own GMRS radios. They're not all that expensive. And if you have a GMRS radio, even if you're not talking to anybody, you can listen to everybody. The GMRS radios that we recommend are all repeater capable, meaning that you can talk to the towers that are being built around Sonoma County. They also have, you can't talk on them, but they also have scanning capability. And we have volunteers, radio volunteers, that will literally program your GMRS radio for you for where you live, so that the scanning will occur of your fire department, your police department, and your sheriff's department, and so forth. So we literally will program your radio so you can listen in on what's going on in an emergency. So back to the basic, remember the buddy system. It's the most effective tool there is to make sure your neighbors are okay and make sure you have redundant solutions. This is what these handheld radios, the GMRS radios I've been talking about, look like. They're real simple. You press the button on the side when you want to talk, and you release it when you want to listen. We actually have protocols on how to use the radio. We also have training sessions that we're starting to run for people. Pitch Mountain's got a group that's been doing this for several months now. Pat will know more about that than I do. But we have been training people at Clover Springs and Clover Aspie. So those are the tools. I'm open to questions, and then Pat is going to chime in and talk a little bit more about how the Pitch Mountain COPE uses their radios. But I'll open any questions.
Great, thank you, Geoff. You want to stop sharing screen?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And then we can see you. Yeah, no, then we can see you full screen. All right. Any questions for Geoff? Elsa, you seen any hands
There was
up?
one-
It's either
there was-
clear as mud or.
There was one in the chat, Priscilla, about from Susan Gansel about whether, I think if there's a threshold number of people willing to form, is there a source of radios, funding, that kind of thing?
We haven't done that yet, but it's certainly possible that we could find a vendor that would be willing to sell the preferred radios if there were a bulk order. We have not. We've been selling them in ones and twos, so we haven't really done that yet. But it's a great idea. Johannes, who's the director of public infrastructure for Sonoma County, and I are working on a grant application to try to buy GMRS radios for volunteer groups. And again, it's not for every neighbor, but it's for the people that are the CERT and COPE leaders with whom we need to have communications. Even if everything else fails, we could still communicate. We're working on a way to try to get those and then have a loan system where you sign out a radio and you can use that radio.
Great, thank you. All right.
Thank you. I have a question.
Moni's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, hi, Moni.
Hi, thank you. Geoff, you seem to, I mean, you have an incredible amount of experience on this, and I have, our neighborhood has benefited from this. I am wondering if you have some thoughts on like how to best strategize this for a neighborhood, whether you have something along the lines of like, okay, neighborhood X, here's your started package of things you should have. Okay, neighborhood B, which has been going on and working on this for this long, because you have these conditions, here's your other package. Is there kind of like a key, I'm a biologist, so I think about, how for species you have selection keys of what's the best material to use. And I'm wondering whether you've given some thought on how to best customize some of these tools, or whether having it all is what should happen.
Pat Abercrombie, are you talking about that? Sorry.
I'm going to defer to Pat on the answer to your question. Most of the stuff that I've been working on is basically CERT has a slightly different need than COPE does, because if we have CERT volunteers that have been deployed, we are required to keep track of them and keep in communication with them for safety reasons. And so our needs are directly sort of command and control. Whereas Pat and what Pitch Mountain has done is probably much more relevant to what you're talking about. So Pat, do you want to answer?
Oh, hold on. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to put it off until I just give my little brief update on what Pitch Mountain's done. So.
Okay. Let me just insert something. What I did, Geoff, with your PowerPoint and kind of my resources list that I've had is I put them together. I merged them together so that our co-leaders will have, and our residents, a really comprehensive list of resources to use. So let me just quickly share my screen and show you what I did to make this all available to you guys. And you can find this in the leadership cassette. I'm going to mute you again, just because we're picking up your sound. Let me, where is it? Okay. All right, you see in my screen?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So as I said, I took a lot of what Geoff had put in there, all the links to find these apps and these websites all in one place, and described what they are, very similar to Geoff's slides. Just know that the alert wildfire cameras have moved to a different site. This is new in September of last year. And that site is here. But weather websites, radio, and then this is very pertinent for during an incident, what are some websites to go to, and then social media, some of the key social media. All right, so I will drop this in the chat and take it and run with it. All of these resources are for you guys to take and do with what you will. So I just wanted people to know. We'll also send out Geoff's PowerPoints. Elsa will send that out in the next newsletter. So you'll have that as well. All right. All right, Mr. Abercrombie, I turn it over to you.
Hold on, Priscilla, we have another question for Geoff.
Ah,
Patty Wen, she says that they have Baofeng dual band FM transceivers for the leader of each area. The Winter Fire programmed them and they're stronger than the walkie-talkies. Patty wants to know, are these the same as GMRS?
They may be. Baofeng manufactures the GMRS radio. I don't know. I would need to know the model number to be able to look it up to see what its capabilities are. And I have a Baofeng radio, but it's actually a fire department radio, so it's not even GMRS. It's the actual fire service. So each radio manufacturer has multiple versions, and we just need to know the model number to be able to answer the question.
thank you. All right, and if you think of other things, just drop them in the chat. We'll have time at the end to answer more questions for sure. Thank you, Patty Wayne, for the great question. Mr. Abercrombie?
Can you read me? That's the only lingo I'm going to say for this little talk. First of all, Susie Cummins could be doing this talk herself. We actually patterned what we're doing off of what Susie started in Cloverdale. But since I've got the floor, I'll take it. This is a little story about FERN, the Fitch Mountain Emergency Radio Net. My advice is start simple. This is not about radios. It's not about repeaters. It's not about antennas. It's not about power supplies. It's about your COPE neighborhood leaders being able to continue to communicate during an emergency. Even simple radios, you can tell from what just happened with Patty and Geoff, even simple radios get complicated quickly. And if you focus on the radio first, people get scared and they back away. So the first thing we did was we had a meeting. We've patterned it actually after Susie's meeting. We had a meeting. We had Marion McDonald from Sebastopol that had worked with their neighborhood groups and their communication unit. And we just had a conversation. We met invited our neighborhood leaders. There are 18 of them. I think we got 12, 13, 14 of them. We met at Del Rio Park just down the road here on Fitch Mountain in our own environment. And we had a conversation about whether radios could come to the rescue for Fitch Mountain if we lost, as Geoff said, if we lost power, lost phones, lost internet, if our roads were blocked, if it was a quake, if it was a flood, if it was a fire. Did folks want to incorporate radios into our communication strategy? We decided as a group that there was enough interest to move forward. We hadn't yet even looked at a radio. At that point, Fitch Mountain Association had some money set aside. We bought 10 radios. We went straight to GMRS. As Geoff said, the FRS radios are not very powerful. Fitch Mountain is topographically a complicated place. It's round and it's tall, and trying to get everybody around the mountain and up and down the mountain able to communicate with a half a watt just wasn't working. So we went straight to GMRS. Our goal was not to get to every house. Our goal was to get the neighborhood leaders able to talk with one another. And that's when the sneaker net kicks in. It does require a license. Geoff just touched on that. No test. We bought 10 radios and the accessories necessary to kind of get us off the ground. It was $1,200 for 10 radios. That's not including the licenses. Our folks were fired up enough that they decided to get the license on their own, $35. By getting the radios ourselves, we were able to standardize. So everybody's got the same radio. We programmed them. Programming the radios is overused term, not rocket science. So we programmed the radios ourselves with all the GMRS channels, the repeater channels, the receive only channels that Geoff was talking about that you can scan to listen in on transmissions that you're not allowed to respond to. That way, with the same radio, everybody can help each other. What's that blue button for? Push the red button. It helps each other, and it gets the radios out of the center of attention. Everybody's using the same thing. Then we had a second meeting. We met at Del Rio again. We brought the radios, we handed them out. We had a little teeny tutorial, gave a one-page handout that people could take home with them. And then we broke into groups and spread out a little bit, and we got on the radios and we talked. It was just getting that, breaking the ice. The PTT, the push to talk button. It's scary. The first time you push that button, you freeze. What am I going to say? Who's going to hear it? When do I take my finger off the button? Am I going to sound stupid? Just get that stuff out of the way. Again, it's not about the radio. Then we picked a day, happened to be the first and third Sundays of the month, 5:30 p.m. That was going to be our net. By having that net, and every 2 weeks, approximately, folks getting together, that makes sure that they keep their radios charged. They remember how to use that PTT button and how to change channels if they need to. A net takes less than 10 minutes. You basically introduce that the net's in place. This is on open airwaves, so there are certain customs that you need to follow because anybody could be listening, including the FCC. So you need to follow the rules, but the net takes about 10 minutes. And so far, so good. We've been doing that since November, earlier than that, October. Fitch Mountain has one of the repeaters Geoff was talking about. It's been instrumental in every one of our neighborhood leaders being able to take part in this net around and up and down the mountain. And we have members who can also hit, as they say, hit the Cloverdale repeater, which is a extremely strong and well-positioned piece of electronics that virtually anywhere in this county, it seems like you can talk to that Cloverdale repeater. So once you've got a net going, they're wonderful ways to expand your knowledge and the ability to communicate more broadly around the county. And we could talk more about how to incorporate ham and the county's auxiliary communication service and be able to communicate between communities as well as within communities. But I'm going to leave it there. I too can take
Alrighty.
questions, or I can take questions, or I'll put my email address in the chat and you can send me.
Pat, let me add one.
Susan Gansel.
Let me add one comment.
Yeah.
Pat, let me add one comment. There's been some concern or hesitancy on people's part, which I'm sure you experienced as well, that if I am on the wrong channel, somehow I'm going to be talking illegally or talking over the fire service or anything like that. The radios that we recommend to people, the GMRS radios, will, as Pat has said, scan those frequencies, but they are automatically designed not to transmit on those frequencies. So you don't have to worry. If you're hitting the button, the PTT button, like Pat says, you're either talking to nobody or you're talking to people that are prepared to listen.
Thanks, Geoff. Folks do have concern. There's plenty of chatter on the internet if you go to those weird corners that these radios allow you to do things that are illegal. And that just has to do with the license. The Baofeng radios that we standardized on Fitch Mountain are the 8-watt version. And again, those are GMRS radios. They're above the FRS power threshold, so you do have to have that license. You're muted, Bub.
Okay, I've got a couple of things here. One is Susan Gansel is asking about what kind of radios we're using. She might be a great person for us to hook up with here on Fitch Mountain as one of the COPE leaders down on Scenic, right?
She should join our net. I got a radio for you.
There you
Susan.
are. There you go. Geoff put some comments in there, you guys, about radios, so be sure to look at that. Heather Cullen is asking, can you tell us how to afford getting radios and antenna? Is there COPE money for this? At this point, there is not COPE money for radios. The radios that we bought on Fitch Mountain were through the Fitch Mountain Association. It sounds like the county may at some point be able to fund some radios for COPE leaders. But they're relatively cheap. Could you talk about that, Pat Abercrombie?
I was reading Susan's message, so I didn't hear all that. You wanted about the radios we use are Baofeng BFF8 HPs. They're HP for high power because they go to 8 watts. It makes a significant enough difference if you add a high gain antenna in terms of the clarity of the transmission and the reception and the distance that you can transmit. If you're doing, see what I mean? It gets complicated. If you're doing simplex, which is radio to radio, and we have an extended battery that we suggest folks buy because these things do take electricity, and the radios that we purchased do not have a AAA battery pack that you can add to it. So we get this extended life battery. Those three things together come in under $100. And that's the standard we have. We just needed to kind of get off the dime and get radios for the group. Geoff and Johannes Hoverts from Public Infrastructure, I think maybe standardizing on different radios, but to me, the most important thing is that within your community, you're all using the same thing, so you know where the buttons are and can help each other.
Thank you for that. Diana Borges is asking about the recommended GMRS route models. Geoff, you know the protocol that you put together for radios, does that have models in it?
No, because the models actually changed about 6 months ago. It's a catch-up game. They're putting out new radios every 3 months, so I can try to get to you the most recent list of the ones that we recommend, and I can add the Baofeng that Pat's talking about. Most of the ones that we're recommending are Ocean, but the Baofeng's perfectly good. The only concern I would have is somebody that buys any GMRS radio that's simplex only, that is not repeater capable, is not going to be able to communicate in areas of difficult communication. So that would be something you don't want to do. I made that mistake very early on. I bought 2 GMRS radios because I was so ignorant about radios. I didn't know that I had to have repeater capability. Those 2 radios are now high-powered FRS radios. But we now have the radio experts. Pat's one of them. He's got his ham license. There are several others that are experts, much more than I. who tell us exactly what we need and are willing to program it free for anybody.
I have a
Great.
question. Can I ask a question? I'm out of my conference, so I can talk out loud now. So I was wondering if since my husband has a radio that he checks in with every Sunday night with people across the county with our church, can I use that radio and connect him with you guys as a COPE leader? And how do I do that?
I suspect that's a ham radio, but I don't know that for sure.
Yes, it's a ham radio. Yeah.
Chances are that's what they call the 2-meter band. Chances are that radio will not do the 70 centimeter band that GMRS operates on.
So I need to get a GMRS, but I can use the same antenna.
Oh, sure. I mean,
Okay.
I say that cavalier. It depends on when you say antenna, do you mean handheld
It's a
radio
very,
antenna,
very
or
tall radio antenna. Yeah.
you'll need to talk with your husband because the ham band is in the 140 5 range and megahertz, and GMRS is in the 462 band. So the antennas operate very differently. See what I mean about getting complicated quick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go offline, Heather, and
Okay. I'll email you or you email me or something. I'll put it in the chat.
that'd be great. I'm going to put mine in the chat anyway so that everybody. So why don't we go that way?
Okay,
Thank
perfect.
you. Elsa, you have your hand up?
All the GMRS radios that we recommend come with an antenna, or we recommend an antenna to attach to the radio because they're just a handheld. So the antenna comes with the radio. It's not a fixed antenna.
Got it.
I was just gonna say we have another question from Patty. She says, where are repeaters located in the county in addition to Fitch Mountain and Cloverdale?
There are 3 that are out in the western part of the county, and one is near Fort Ross. There's 2 others that are in the process of being developed. The county appropriated a certain amount of money for GMRS on a kind of a let's see what happens kind of thing. We've run through most of that money. It was a $1 million appropriation, and a tower cost something in the neighborhood of $180,000 to construct. So we've run through a fair amount of that money. There's going to be a report made to the Board of Supervisors of the county on the program. We are hoping that the success of the program, as Pat says, the Cloverdale antenna and radio repeater, which has got cellular backup, Starlink backup, power backup, a generator backup. I mean, it's multiple redundant system, and it goes all the way from Ukiah all the way down to Rohnert Park. So it's really pretty cool. And so we think that with that kind of success, the county's going to say, for not a lot of money for the county, they can continue to see this program expand and also help us with purchasing radios. But the county, it remains to be seen.
And so you said there are 2 repeater towers in the works. Where are those in the works for? Because at the end of West.
Pat, do you have the exact locations? I'd have to go look up the exact locations. I can get you that information. Department of Transportation and Public Works, now the Department of Public Infrastructure, is the one that we were originally putting up a 30-foot steel tower of our own using hardware store equipment, and the county came along and said, let us put the tower up for you. Our tower was going to cost about $100. Their tower cost $100,000. But it's a pretty cool tower because it withstands 200-mile-an-hour winds.
Great. So I just want to clarify the two towers that you're talking about that are still to go up. I just want to make sure I understood this right, are in West County. They're not in North County. So they wouldn't be of help to Patty Wayne. Is that right?
I'm not positive of that because Mill Creek has requested a tower as well. And what we're trying to do is determine whether or not the county, when they originally appropriated the money, they didn't appropriate the money for fire cameras. They appropriated the money for GMRS at the request of the Department of Public Infrastructure. So we have to get the clearance from the radio guys that we need a repeater at Mill Creek before we can say to them, we can build a tower and also put fire cameras and radio on the tower. So the priority from the county's point of view is not the fire cameras, it's the GMRS radio system. So we have to get approval for where it's going to go, and that requires the radio guys to do these grids where they say, if you had a tower in this location, where would it reach that isn't reachable right now?
Great. Got it. Got it. Okay, great. So the research is still happening, Patty, and hopefully that'll benefit all of the north area as well.
I'll chime
Yes,
in for
and
just,
as Moni says, much thanks to Geoff for all the work that you've done up on this higher level of getting this all organized and happening. Pat, were you going to say something?
I was just going to mention that Fitch Mountain ended up with a repeater largely because we have water tanks on the mountain, and we have one, fairly far up the mountain, and with hardware on it and solar panels on it and metal masts and towers and things already there for monitoring the water tank. And it made it relatively easy to add a repeater. So it wasn't that we were cooler than everybody else or that Priscilla and I screamed and yelled or anything. It's just, it was all sitting there kind of waiting.
All right.
Yeah, we
Thank
all
you
know
for
you're
that.
cooler than everybody.
Oh boy, I'm gonna live that one down maybe.
Thanks, Geoff. That's
Thanks
good.
for that, Geoff. All right. Any other questions? All right, I would like to turn it over to Elsa because she's got a really cool spotlight to do to talk about Brack, Big Ridge, Chemise and how cool Randy is, because he's pretty cool too, and his group over there. So let me turn it over to Elsa.
Hi, everyone. Oh, hold on. Wait 1 second. Okay. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
So today, sorry, I'm spotlighting Brack, Big Ridge, and Chemise COPE, and we have 2 members with us right now. We have Randy and Holly. What are the boundaries of Brack, Big Ridge, and Chemise community? So this COPE community includes the neighbors on the following roads. It's not just Brack, Big Ridge, and Chemise. We have French Road, Jameson Road, Jack Pine Road, Shana Way, and Dorman Canyon Road. They all share evacuation routes of the same long ridge line. This COPE community was created informally in 2018, and they had temporary members of Mill Creek COPE, and it formally formed in fall of 2020. How does this COPE community communicate? So this COPE group communicates to an email distribution list. It's usually for non-emergency communication, and they have sent out monthly newsletters in the past, but they paused them because of less fire-related activity. They have a dedicated email list for during emergencies to signal non-routine communications. And there is a phone tree that Chemise Rose has utilized. So some of the activities that they've done in the past is volunteering at the Go Bag booth during the CERT Expo. Their distribution list includes neighbors on Brack, Big Ridge, and Chemise and offshoot roads in that vicinity. Their original list is over 124 neighbors, although some of them no longer reside in the area, since the Walbridge fire includes those who chose to opt in from nearby roads. And their outreach and recruitment are an unending task, and they're challenged to engage more neighbors, which is something that they're working on right now. So why did this community think it was so important to be a part of COPE and get prepared for emergencies? They all survived the Walbridge fire, and according to them, that galvanized their leader group and engaged more neighbors. So they said in a conversation with me that their neighborhoods were the eastern edge of the Walbridge fire. Some neighbors had a total loss of property and structures. Others were partially impacted, and those further to the east were spared direct contact with the fire. However, everyone in the area was affected. So some of the projects that this COPE group has been working on in collaboration with us and Northern Sonoma County Fire District to become better prepared are, for example, roadside clearing in 2021 with the fuels crew. They have been fortunate recipients of various grants and resources. Chief Marshall Torberville secured a grant for fuels breaks of a Big Ridge, and that work was undertaken in 2022. What makes this COPE community unique? So according to them, they're mostly people who are living rurally for a reason. There's a radical independence and minimal desire to coordinate or be connected among some of the legacy residents here. Some of their newer entrants to the neighborhood have a different mindset in some cases, and they're all eager to be prepared. And well, those are less experienced with rural living. So some of their future goals, this COPE community would like to work on strategies to win more connection and people's involvement, generating resources that are needed for ongoing sustainable vegetation management. They live primarily on private roads, and there seems to be limited grant money to do routine vegetation management according to them. And these rural private roads are vulnerable and it is costly. Road safety is something very important to this group. They want to make sure that all roads are drivable during an evacuation and well maintained given big equipment impacts. And lastly, they all agreed that being a part of COPE has benefited them, and they gave me this quote. It says, "COPE is stealth community building. People become more aware of who's living around them. And we always say an emergency isn't the time to get to know people in your neighborhood. The information sharing, training, and countywide collaborations through COPE have enhanced everyone's awareness level and access to resources and preparedness activities." So this is COPE Brack Big Ridge Chemise Road.
Excellent. Thank you, Elsa. Do Holly or Randy want to add anything? Or does anybody have any questions or comments?
It's Randy. Thank you, Elsa. I think you did a great job of distilling our comments that we had at our Zoom meeting. You know, we're up here where I imagine this is the same in every COPE neighborhood, but we're also, besides being all neighbors, so many of us are close friends, and we socialize with each other, and this is a good way for us to build bonds and to make sure that everybody's taken care of in any kind of emergency, because these aren't just random people that you want to reach out to. These are also people who are friends. And I think that's been one way that we've kind of kept our COPE group cohesive, coherent too. And we found that that's one of the most important aspects of our group, is the outreach and the camaraderie and the eagerness to help and make sure that everybody stays safe.
Randy,
Thank you, Randy.
I have a question, Randy or Holly. Wait, what's your COPE group trying, like, what are your goals for the next year or so? What would be great success? And I'm trying to think, you know, how can COPE broadly maybe support you all as you go after that?
Holly, you want to take this, or you want me to go? Okay, well, anyway, I'll just go. So unfortunately, there was a person in our group who is really the ramrod that gets us all going, and that's Taya Levine. And unfortunately, she had a prior engagement. She couldn't join us. But one of the things that she's good at is organization, and she's the person who's been able to keep everybody aware of the grants that are available, and specifically what we can do with that money. And as Elsa said, being on a private road, we have to be kind of self-sufficient. We maintain the road ourselves. But we want to pursue any kind of opportunities that there are for the county to help us out, because yeah, it's a private road and we don't get county services, but you know, we're also vulnerable up here. And our main concern is that we keep all of the escape routes open for during an emergency. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be pursuing in the coming year, is trying to get help with taking down some overhanging trees, and making sure that drainage and all that things that go with maintaining a road get done. And as it said, and as Elsa said in her presentation, the quote from us was that it is expensive. And we have a lot of people up here who are engaged, a lot of people who don't have the means to participate. That doesn't mean that they don't have the will. It's just they can't participate as much as they would.
But certainly vegetation management with an eye toward evacuation routes is
absolutely
the topic. And I don't know if Marshall's been able to join the call yet. I haven't seen
I
it.
think he's in a Fire Safe Sonoma meeting. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that. I didn't know if he was able to join us. But Randy, he was able, we have private roads and public roads on West Soda Rock, and some of the CAL FIRE grant money has, been able to help. And I know that his fuels crew has been able to be in your area. And but it's good to know, we have different groups that are seeking different things, and that's something that Marshall's very knowledgeable about. And so, but it's good to have you all on our radar. Yeah.
Well, yes, thank you. And you reminded me that he has been able to organize a number of controlled burns or prescribed burns up here. And they've been concentrated along the roadway because obviously that's another reason we will to keep the road open, or another way to keep the road open is to make sure that all of the vegetation that borders the road, if we have controlled burns, sorry, prescribed burns. He always corrects me when I say controlled, because he says they're not always controlled. But that's one way that we hope to keep the roads open. We've talked about having a community broom pole for the Scotch broom and the French broom that is just ubiquitous up here. And of course, the poison oak and things like that. And that's something that we're going to try to get going this spring as soon as we can.
Great. Thank you for sharing your experience. It's really helpful for the other communities to hear about what you're up to. And I heard a little bit about struggle too with getting new people on board, trying to reach deeper into the community where people aren't necessarily part of your friendships, but reaching further out, you know, and I'm hoping that the toolkit that COPE has developed will be helpful for some of that in community engagement. I also wanted to highlight something that I resonated with really strongly around relationship building, and how, as a result of the work that I've been doing in COPE, I mean, I've made friendships that are just some of the most meaningful and important relationships that I have with my neighbors and people in my community. And those of you out there that are also COPE leaders, it's not an unexpected piece of the work that we're doing that I just wanted to highlight, Randy, because it's really heartfelt, and I agree with you that is a wonderful outcome of the COPE work.
Yep, I agree.
There's a question in the chat, Randy and others, did anyone in your neighborhood object to signing the waiver, right? You have to have that waiver to be on someone's property for the fuels crew to do the work, or others doing the work. Toyon also has a grant, so they're dealing with that, getting permission, and I bet Pat Abercrombie could probably add to the experience here on Fitch Mountain some of the work that he's done around getting private landowner approval. Randy, how'd that go for you guys? And Diane as well, right?
You know, I can't really speak to that, only in the sense of before we got the county involved and CAL FIRE involved, we were trying to do road clearing, the salvages of the road cleared on our own. And of course, we would only do it with the owner's permission. And one of the owners, who lives in somewhere in LA, but has a lot of property that borders the road, strictly refused to allow us to do it. No idea why, because it was, you know, to his benefit to agree. But when CAL FIRE got involved, he seemed to, I don't know, say, okay. So I don't know if it's because it was a government agency, a quasi-government agency, and we were just neighbors that it carried some weight. But anyway, that's just an anecdote.
Thank you. Yeah. Diane, do you have any input from your work that you're doing for your grant? You're muted right now. Diane, you're muted. There you go, hon.
There we go. It's a range of responses. Sometimes, you know, there are a lot of imagined problems, you know, that's going to be clear cutting and whatever. So we've had to kind of address them one by one. And sometimes, you know, coming in and saying what Randy's saying, oh, it's Marshall's crew. And so, you know, and here's good work they've done other places. Other people, it's being very specific about what's actually going to happen. It's a roadside clearing project. It goes up to 30 feet, but, you know, from the road, but it's primarily bush and dead, dead limbs but it's some of the overhang, and, you know, people have a range of questions and issues, and we've tried to just address it individually, you know, as they come up. But I do have tips for someone if they're in that circumstance of sort of how to put out the messaging at the beginning, and then how to you know, try to enlist people as you go.
Great, thank you, Diane. Hey, Scott Newman, you guys have had a fair amount of work over in your area as well. You have any tips or responses to talk about, you know, private land and how people have responded to the work? Getting consent?
I really don't have anything to add in that regard. We've got a lot of kind of, you know, larger corporate users too that own a lot of the acreage, and that's kind of a unique issue. As a consequence, I think we get more and, you know, more people embrace COPE and its mission in Franz Valley than Knights Valley. I'm sorry, I don't really have a lot to add.
Okay, great. Well, that's of interest too, that corporation kind of piece of it, that's unique to your area, and also probably some unique to some other rural areas as well. So thank you for that.
Priscilla, I do have two things. I do have two things.
Yeah.
Well, yes, on the corporate bit, they tend to be very enthusiastic, as Scott's saying, and it's easy to get them, but you have to go through, you know, the operations manager and then the legal counsel. So you just do it that way. But I think my tip is to make the emails that you're sending to people one-offs. So to each landowner, you send the description and the waiver, because getting a group going where people are raising issues and questions on top of each other among people that may not have had any issues to begin with is not helpful to the process. So to do all of these as one-off, and then because people's needs are different, or dealing with the corporations is obvious, you know, the wineries and all that is separate from individuals, but also just to do them as one-off emails is a better way to go.
Wow, there's some wisdom there. All right, there's a pearl for you. All right. Any other questions?
Annika put in the chat that she was asking specifically about signing the waiver.
Right. Well, this is kind of what we've been discussing, is the issues around private landowners having vegetation work done, and that's what we've been talking about, Elsa, is you know, kind of what the barriers have been, and what kinds of words of wisdom people have about dealing with landowners around that vegetation management piece.
Does anybody know, can the county just say, for the good of all, for the good of, you know, the safety of all, we're going to do it anyway, whether we have the waiver, because it's you kind of like eminent domain, sort of.
Yeah.
No,
Randy,
you can't.
I was told up to 10 or 12 feet, at least on one of our roads is a county road, that the county has that jurisdiction. But Marshall, because he likes to work so cooperatively, likes to get landowner approval. For our private roads, I was told that's not necessarily true, but I don't know the legality around that.
In our experience, it is necessary. I mean, it has been for us. I mean, we work with Marshall, of course. So, but it has been necessary for us to get approval from each and every one of the owners. And yeah, we're having some challenges, for instance, with some of our emergency evacuation routes right now, precisely because there's one person who is not in agreement of what the route looks like and the benefits that it would bring. But you know, even in this cases, I don't think it's possible to just say, you know what, this is good for you, you should have it. I think it gets a little more complicated than that.
So there's just a couple of things I wanted to raise. One is whether you're talking about public or private roads. Okay, so that's an important thing to discern. And then secondly, whether you're just talking about the right of way on the road, just, you know, clearing within whatever Diane's talking about, I think it's 10 to 12 feet. I don't know, Pat, you probably know better than I do. But what we've tried to do is do more, like 30 to 100 feet, right? To do a better job of clearing farther back. In that case, we need landowner permission. So we're kind of talking, you got to be kind of clear about what you're trying to do. And again, that level of clearing will make a difference in how much permission you need to get.
Right. And another,
right.
If we can just say this real quickly, another consideration is habitat destruction. I mean, yeah, we want to make sure that all the people are kept safe, but those areas along the roads are also important habitat for wildlife. And that, I think that has to be a consideration, especially if it's a unique habitat where only certain species are found.
Right. Right on.
Marshall's crew is very knowledgeable about that, as well as embankment integrity and habitat. And before we do any work, there's the environmental impact study. So
I want to circle back. Annika, if you're still on, could you let us know whether you got your question answered or not? I couldn't tell by your comment in the chat. Oh, she must be okay. All right. Just a reminder that our next leadership meeting next month is in person, and it will also be on Zoom as well for those of you that can't make it, but I would love to encourage you to be there. There's something about being in a room together that is really special right now after COVID. And we're going to be working on our toolkit and getting your feedback on that, and looking for some activities that we can do together to make that a better tool, hopefully. So I hope to see you all there. Any parting comments or
Can you announce
go?
time and place again,
Yeah,
please?
thank you.
Yeah. So again, this is just for COPE leaders and collaborating organizations. So the community leaders for each of the COPE communities. So there should be 2 leaders usually for each of the communities. It's always the 3rd Monday of the month.
Okay.
All right. And you should be getting emails specifically about the leadership group if you are a COPE community leader. And if you're not, please let Elsa know, let me know, so that we can add you to the list, because we don't want to miss you either. All right. Anything else? Patty, the meeting is at Geyserville, Northern Sonoma County Fire District. Geyserville Station. All right, thank you, Geoff Peters, for the great talk on communication. And hopefully we will see you all next month. Thank you, Nancy Brown, for your spotlight, and for Pat Abercrombie for talking about radios. We're glad to have you all here. Have a good month. We'll see you next month. Take good care, everyone.
Bye.